confess that my breakdown between your mother and I has caused emotional unbalance in the family.
It's the time I don't like my family. Everyone in my family.
Take a breath.
Everybody. I feel like I'm angry at everybody in my family. I don't like my family. If they weren't my family, it wouldn't be my.
The silence didn't just break. It fractured into 1,000 pieces at once. Because what started as whispers, quiet, scattered, almost dismissible, suddenly turned into something far louder, far messier, and far more dangerous. Multiple voices. Multiple perspectives. And one explosive claim echoing across the internet. The truth about that family has never been told. Overnight, the spotlight snapped back onto the Braxtons, not for music, not for sisterhood, but for something that felt like it had been buried under years of carefully controlled narratives. And at the center of it all, the ex-husbands. Men who had once stood beside the sisters, inside the family, inside the story, and who were now allegedly stepping forward with versions of events that didn't match what the public thought it knew. No single interview. No official documentary. Just a series of leaks, comments, and insider whispers that started lining up in ways no one expected. And that's when the internet froze. Because it wasn't one voice. It was several. Different timelines. Different marriages. But eerily similar themes. Toxic patterns. Control behind the scenes. Stories rewritten after everything falls apart. Those phrases began circulating like wildfire. Fans weren't just reacting. They were connecting dots. Old clips resurfaced. Arguments from Braxton family values suddenly looked different. Moments that once felt chaotic now felt calculated. And then came the most chilling rumor of all. According to multiple gossip sources, there may be private recordings, conversations captured during arguments that were never meant to leave closed doors. No confirmed audio. No verified release. But insiders claim these recordings allegedly reveal what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling. And if even one of those recordings surfaces, it could redefine everything the public believes about the Braxton legacy. Meanwhile, fans are divided. Some are calling this a coordinated attack by exes trying to rewrite history. Others are asking a much harder question. What if too many stories sound alike to ignore? Because once multiple people start telling versions of the same experience, it stops feeling like coincidence. And starts feeling like something that was always there. Just waiting for the moment it couldn't stay hidden anymore. The first crack didn't come from a headline. It came from a whisper that should have stayed buried. According to multiple insiders circling the situation, the unraveling began when one former partner, someone who had spent years inside the orbit of the Braxtons, allegedly decided he was done staying silent. Not angry. Not reckless. Just done. And what he reportedly said behind closed doors didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like release. He said the hardest part wasn't the marriage, one source claimed. It was surviving the family dynamic around it. That single sentence hit like a shockwave. Because for years, fans believed the Braxton story was built on unbreakable loyalty, fierce love, and a bond no outsider could truly understand. Now, that same bond was being reframed as something far more complicated. And the moment that whisper leaked online, everything changed. Within hours, anonymous accounts began posting what they claimed were private messages exchanged between ex-husbands, conversations that allegedly revealed shared frustrations, similar experiences, and one chilling realization. We all walked away saying the same thing. No proof. No verification. But the wording. Too specific to ignore. Then came the resurfaced footage. Clips from Braxton family values flooded timelines, but this time, fans weren't watching for entertainment. They were watching for patterns. One viral clip showed a heated argument where voices overlapped, emotions escalated, and one outsider, an ex-husband, looked visibly overwhelmed as multiple sisters spoke at once. At the time, viewers laughed it off as classic Braxton chaos. Now, people were asking, was that chaos or pressure? Another clip surfaced showing a family meeting where decisions seemed to be made collectively, quickly, decisively, while the outsider in the room struggled to insert his perspective. Again, nothing unusual at first glance. But in this new context, it felt different. Because when you start looking for patterns, everything begins to align. Meanwhile, insiders began dropping more details, carefully, anonymously, just enough to keep the story moving without confirming anything outright. One source claimed that once a relationship inside the Braxton family began to crack, the narrative shifted almost immediately. Once things go bad, the story gets decided fast, the insider said. And if you're not part of the family, you don't get a vote. That idea spread fast. Because it echoed something fans had noticed but never fully questioned. After breakups, the sisters often appeared unified, strong, certain. And the ex-husbands, they disappeared. Not gradually. Almost instantly. Their voices faded. Their perspectives vanished. And the story moved forward without them. At the time, it felt natural. Now, it felt strategic. Then came the first major twist. A well-known entertainment blogger posted a cryptic message that sent shockwaves through the fanbase. There's a group chat. A group chat. Allegedly involving multiple ex-husbands connected to the Braxton sisters. According to the blogger, this private conversation had been active for months, possibly years, where these men shared their experiences, frustrations, and what one source described as the things no one else would understand. No screenshots were released. No names confirmed. But the idea alone. Explosive. Because if multiple people from completely separate relationships were privately expressing similar concerns, that wasn't just gossip. That was pattern recognition. And the internet ran with it. Threads began mapping out timelines. Fans compared relationship arcs. They looked at how each marriage started, how it unfolded publicly, and how it ended. Different stories. Different dynamics. But eerily similar conclusions. Emotional exhaustion. Communication breakdowns. And one recurring phrase that started appearing in comment sections everywhere. It's not just the relationship. It's the environment. That phrase stuck. Because it shifted the focus away from individuals and toward the system surrounding them. Meanwhile, more alleged leaks surfaced. This time, it wasn't just messages. It was audio. Short clips. Muffled voices. Heated exchanges where multiple people were talking at once. Nothing clear. Nothing confirmed. But listeners claimed they could hear tension, not just between couples, but involving multiple family members at the same time. If authentic, those recordings didn't show a single argument. They showed a dynamic. One that felt intense. Overwhelming. And, to some listeners, difficult to navigate if you weren't part of the core family bond. But the most chilling moment came when a second insider dropped a statement that instantly went viral. You don't argue with one Braxton. You argue with all of them. That line hit differently. Because it reframed everything fans thought they understood about the family's unity. What once looked like strength now raised a new question. When does unity become pressure? The internet split instantly. Supporters of the Braxtons defended them fiercely, arguing that strong families naturally stand together, especially in times of conflict. They pointed out that reality TV exaggerates tension, edits conversations, and creates narratives designed for entertainment. And they weren't wrong. But critics weren't backing down either. They argued that when multiple outsiders describe similar experiences, it's worth asking why. Not to assign blame, but to understand the full picture. Because patterns don't always mean guilt. But they do mean something is happening. And then, just when it seemed like the story couldn't get more intense, another rumor surfaced, one that changed everything again. According to a source claiming to have direct knowledge, there may be an unaired segment from a past filming session where one of the ex-husbands allegedly confronted multiple sisters at once. The scene, the source claims, was never released because it was too revealing. Too revealing of what? No one knows. But if that footage exists, and if it ever leaks, it could provide the first real glimpse into what these insiders are describing. And that possibility, it has fans watching closer than ever. Because now, the question isn't just what happened in those relationships. It's what happened off camera. And whether the story the public saw was only part of the truth. The second wave didn't hit like a shock. It crept in slowly, and then tightened its grip. Because by now, the internet wasn't reacting emotionally anymore. It was analyzing, breaking down, reconstructing every piece of the Braxton narrative like investigators trying to solve a puzzle that suddenly didn't fit together anymore. And that's when the story took a darker turn. Not louder, darker. Because the conversation shifted from what happened to something far more unsettling. How deep does this go? Within days of the first alleged leaks, more insiders began stepping forward, not publicly, not on record, but through carefully placed comments, anonymous tips, and cryptic posts that all pointed in the same direction. This wasn't about one relationship. It was about a pattern. One source described it like this. It's not what happens during the good times. It's what happens when you disagree with them. That line spread across social media like wildfire. Because suddenly, people weren't just watching old clips, they were watching them differently. One viral moment from Braxton Family Values showed a disagreement escalating rapidly. Voices raised. Interruptions layered on top of interruptions. And one ex-husband sitting there, trying to speak, but never quite getting the floor. At the time, it felt like chaos. Now, fans were asking, was that chaos, or was that control through overwhelm? The reanalysis didn't stop there. Entire episodes were being revisited. Fans began pointing out moments where decisions appeared to be made collectively, quickly, forcefully, with little room for outside input. Moments where one sister spoke, then another backed her up, then another, until the narrative became impossible to challenge without escalating the conflict even further. And that's when a second alleged insider comment changed everything. You don't win arguments in that family. You survive them. That phrase hit harder than any accusation. Because it didn't suggest cruelty. It suggested imbalance. And imbalance, especially in relationships, is where things start to break. Meanwhile, more alleged messages began circulating, this time claiming to show conversations between two ex-husbands comparing their experiences. Again, no verification. No confirmed source. But the tone. Unsettlingly similar. One message allegedly read, "It's not one person. It's how they move together." Another said, "I kept thinking it was just me, until I heard your story." Those lines alone were enough to send the internet into another spiral. Because now, the narrative wasn't just about individual relationships failing. It was about multiple people allegedly experiencing the same dynamic. And once that idea takes hold, it's hard to ignore. But just as the speculation reached a boiling point, something unexpected happened. Pushback. Strong, immediate, and relentless. Supporters of the Braxtons began flooding timelines with counter-arguments. They pointed out that reality TV is edited for drama. That emotional expression doesn't equal toxicity. That ex-husbands, by definition, are not neutral narrators. And they weren't wrong. Divorce rarely leaves anyone objective. Pain reshapes memory. And public narratives are almost always incomplete. But even within that defense, the conversation didn't fully settle. Because for every argument defending the family, there was another asking a deeper question. If everything is just editing, why do the stories sound so similar? That question lingered. And then came the most explosive development yet. A major entertainment podcast host dropped a claim that sent shockwaves through the entire situation. There's a recording where everything comes out. Everything. According to the host, the alleged recording wasn't just another argument. It was a full confrontation. Multiple voices. Multiple accusations. And what they described as a moment where one of the ex-husbands finally said everything he had been holding back. The host didn't release the audio. They didn't confirm who was in it. But they claimed it existed. And that it had been heard by people who know exactly what happened behind the scenes. If that recording is real, then what the public has seen so far might only be a fraction of the truth. Meanwhile, something else started happening. Fans began turning their attention inward, away from specific allegations and toward something bigger. The family structure itself. Threads began appearing analyzing the concept of loyalty. Not as a positive, but as something that, when taken to extremes, can become rigid, unyielding, even suffocating. People began asking, what happens when loyalty leaves no room for disagreement? What happens when unity becomes non-negotiable? And what happens to outsiders, partners, spouses, who enter that system expecting flexibility? Those questions didn't come with answers. But they changed the tone of the conversation completely. Because now, the story wasn't just about who said what. It was about how systems function. Meanwhile, the Braxton sisters themselves remained largely silent. No direct responses to the rumors. No public statements addressing the alleged leaks. Just the occasional social media post, normal, controlled, unrelated to the storm happening around them. And that silence, it didn't calm anything. It made everything feel more intentional. Because now, fans weren't just watching the story unfold. They were waiting. Waiting to see if anyone would step forward. Waiting to see if the rumored audio would surface. Waiting to see if the narrative would finally be challenged or confirmed. And then, just as the conversation reached its peak, another cryptic message appeared online. Posted by an account known for dropping insider hints, it read, "There's a reason some things never aired." That line sent chills through the fanbase. Because it suggested something even bigger than what had already been discussed. Not just private arguments. Not just alleged group chats. But moments that were filmed and then hidden. If that's true, then the story the public saw may not just be incomplete. It may have been carefully edited. And if even one of those unseen moments ever surfaces, the narrative surrounding the Braxton family could shift in ways no one is prepared for. The third wave didn't arrive with noise. It arrived with weight. Because by now, the speculation had done something irreversible. It had settled into people's minds as possibility. Not confirmed truth, but something that felt real enough to question everything. And that's when the story stopped being about drama and started feeling like a reckoning. At this stage, the internet wasn't chasing new leaks anymore. It was sitting with what had already surfaced and realizing how much of it couldn't be undone. Because once a narrative shifts, even slightly, it changes how every past moment is remembered. And for the Braxtons, that shift was impossible to ignore. Fans began speaking differently. Not in extremes. Not in blind defense or full accusation. But in something more uncomfortable. Acknowledgement of complexity. Because here's what had become clear. No documents had been verified. No recordings had been officially released. No ex-husband had stepped forward on record with confirmed, undeniable proof. And yet, too many patterns had been noticed to simply dismiss. Too many similar themes had surfaced across different stories. Too many moments from Braxton family values now looked different when viewed through this new lens. And that realization, it didn't explode. It lingered. Meanwhile, a new wave of commentary began emerging, less sensational, more reflective. Relationship experts, mental health advocates, even long-time fans. They weren't trying to prove anything anymore. They were trying to understand. Because what this story had exposed wasn't just alleged behavior. It was a question about systems. Family systems. Emotional systems. The kind of systems that don't break loudly, but slowly, over time, under pressure. One analyst put it bluntly. Sometimes the issue isn't one person. It's the structure everyone is operating inside. That idea changed everything. Because it removed the need for a villain. And replaced it with something far more complicated. A dynamic. One built on loyalty, history, shared trauma, and survival. But also one that may not easily adapt to outsiders. And that's where the emotional core of the story finally came into focus. Because if multiple people enter the same system and leave feeling unheard, overwhelmed, or erased, that doesn't automatically mean the system is malicious. But it does mean the system is difficult to survive if you don't fully belong to it. Meanwhile, the silence from the Braxton sisters continued. No direct denial. No detailed explanation. No attempt to publicly dismantle the narrative. And at this point, that silence felt different. Not defensive. Not dismissive. But almost intentional. Because engaging with something this layered, this unverified, this emotionally charged, could easily make things worse. And maybe, just maybe, that silence was a refusal to turn something deeply personal into public spectacle. But on the other side of that silence, questions, unanswered, unresolved, lingering in every comment section, every discussion thread, every viral clip. Questions like, why do the stories sound so similar? Why do outsiders seem to disappear so completely once relationships end? And why does the public version of events always feel so unified? Those questions don't accuse. But they don't disappear either. And then came the final shift. Not from insiders. Not from bloggers. But from the audience itself. People started pulling back. Not out of disinterest, but out of awareness. Because by now, it had become clear that this wasn't a story that could be fully understood from the outside. No matter how many clips were analyzed. No matter how many rumors circulated. No matter how many alleged leaks appeared. There were layers here that only the people involved could truly know. And that realization brought something rare to a viral controversy. Restraint. But even with that restraint, one truth remained impossible to ignore. This story had changed how people viewed the Braxton narrative. Not destroyed it. Not rewritten it entirely. But complicated it. Because now, the image of unbreakable sisterhood existed alongside a new possibility. That the same bond that made the family strong might also make it difficult for anyone outside of it to fully belong. And that duality, that's what will linger long after the headlines fade. Because this wasn't a story with a clean ending. No final reveal. No definitive proof. No clear villain. Just a series of voices, patterns, and questions that refuse to fully settle. And maybe that's the real truth here. Not something explosive. Not something easily proven. But something far more unsettling. That some stories aren't meant to be fully exposed. They are meant to be felt. And once you feel them, you can't unsee what they might mean. If you've made it all the way through this, then you already know, this wasn't just another piece of celebrity drama you scroll past and forget. This was layered. Complicated. Uncomfortable. Because what started as whispers about the Braxtons turned into something much bigger. A conversation about loyalty, power, family dynamics, and the parts of a story we don't get to see. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Do you believe these patterns mean something deeper is going on behind the scenes? Or do you think this is just a case of exes speaking out and the internet connecting dots that don't actually exist? There's no easy answer here, and that's exactly why your voice matters. Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Not just quick reactions, real opinions. Because conversations like this don't live in headlines, they live in discussions. And if you're someone who wants more than surface-level gossip, if you want the deeper context, the layered breakdowns, and the stories behind the stories, then you need to stay tapped in. Hit like. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because the moment something new drops, whether it's a response, a clarification, or one of those rumored recordings finally surfacing, you do not want to hear about it late. Stay locked in. Because stories like this don't end. They evolve. And the next twist could change everything.